abstain,
I will abstain.
but thank you.
All right.
Okay, so then we need to elect a vice president. I open the floor for nominations for vice president.
I would nominate Clark Beard for pro tem.
Second.
It's a
was
race for
that?
second
What was
today.
that?
So I had Jeff, and I heard like a tie. I might give it to Mike since Joe was already memorialized on the first one there. So all those in favor of Clark being vice president, raise your right hand. That motion carries 5-0. We're short one member today. Carol had a previously scheduled trip, and so she'll join us for her first meeting in February, so we'll welcome her aboard then. Okay, we got a couple of meeting minutes that we need to approve, two meetings in December, the regular meeting on December 13th, and then the final cleanup meeting from the 27th. So let's take those one at a time. Clark, did you get a chance to?
I did. I reviewed them when Janet sent them out to me shortly after the meetings, and I'd make a motion to approve the December 13th minutes. You want them separate?
Let's do separate.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have a motion to approve the
Second.
first set, second by Jeff. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion. Okay, motion carries 5-0 with Todd abstaining. The special meeting for December 27th.
Oh.
It was a short meeting that Clark chaired.
I'll make a motion to approve those as well.
Okay, a motion by Clark, a second by Jeff. All of those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 4-0 with Todd and Alan both abstaining as not being in attendance. Our monthly community corrections report with Brett. Good morning.
We have 93 on our program today. 2 are on CTP. We have 4 juveniles, and we also have 2 on pretrial release. Like I mentioned at the last meeting, we are getting our new canine on the 16th. I'm also sending up Officer Hillman's wife to help pick out the dogs. I think it is a family venture, so I wanted her to have some input on that. So we'll have him in our office next week. Finishing up my annual report for the state. I'm missing one financial component for December, but I can give you some numbers on clients served and such. Last year we served 476 clients. That was down 9% from last year. But our average length of stay for clients was actually up 16% to 131 days. The big number that the state does look at is how many high-level nonviolent felons did we keep in the community instead of sending to DOC. That number was up from 57 to 60 last year, which equates to a savings to the state of $1.55 million. So that's really what they focus on and what, kind of the basis of what we do and why we do it. Any questions?
I assume that would weigh heavily in your grant renewal, wouldn't
You
it?
always hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's the figure that sticks out to them, and we're doing what we're supposed to do. So
Yeah.
it comes back on some additional grant money.
Yeah. Any questions for Brett?
Yes. Brett, so the longer stay or the longer treatment or whatever, what does that say?
Well, that's really, I don't have a lot of say in that. I mean, it's what the courts are doing upstairs.
No, I'm sorry, what does that say about the people that are that are there? Is it more training or more?
Well, let me put it this way. I feel the longer that I can supervise them, the better outcome we're going to have.
Okay.
So I'm always happy to see a longer stay because we can do more treatment, more programming,
Treatment,
and those
that was
things.
the word. Yeah, okay.
When they only come for us for a couple months, it's hard to get them in and keep them engaged, but the longer we have them, the better success rate we have.
Okay, great.
I should have mentioned, yeah, we did have a success rate of about 97% last year, so
Very good.
very favorable.
Okay, thank you.
Success rate being defined as?
Completed the sentence that the courts ordered.
Okay, okay.
Alan, I'd just like to say I'm really proud of Brett. All he does in this community, not only his job as overseeing the community corrections, but you also see him out at other events and working with recovery groups and committees and things like that. He's very dedicated.
Thank you, appreciate that.
You're kind of like an offensive lineman. You don't want to hear your name in the public, but you need to be recognized for all of the good work you do, you know? So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
I don't know if you want to move into the opioid settlement now, or?
Well, let me just acknowledge, stay there, well, you'll come up quick, but I do want to acknowledge that we did not have an update to the probation report for January. I see we had the year-end, unless I missed it. Looked like we had the year-end 2022.
Yeah, well, let's see.
Yeah, December. That's what would be the.
Well, I guess that's true, yeah, we would have a January number, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, Brett, go ahead and have a seat, because I do have one other item on the agenda before the opioid committee. And that is for our friends with Community Howard Behavioral Health, who I think have a presentation for us. We have Allison, George, Danielle, and Tanya with us today. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you.
So, no, thank you. My name is George Hurd. I'm the Vice President for Behavioral Health at Community Health Network. So, appreciate you letting us be here. I know we, if I understand correctly, we were asked to come here to this meeting after a meeting we had last month with the county commissioners. And it's a meeting where we were having to explain a difficult decision we were making to close down our clinic here in Frankfurt. And so I think that's a decision that probably has raised a lot of concerns. And so I wanted to address that decision as well as what we are doing in this county, and then also answer any questions and provide some data. So first thing I'm happy to explain is our decision to do that. We had to make the decision when we made the decision because the location we're in as a community mental health center that's associated with a hospital, our funding is derived primarily from Medicaid and Medicare. And so our numbers are 57% of our clients have Medicare, 14% have Medicaid, 14% are self-pay, so they have no insurance, they're paying out of pocket, and only 16% of our consumers are commercial pay persons. And our government payers have not adjusted their rates since the late 1990s. And so that means our reimbursements for our cost structure have remained stagnant for decades. Yet the cost of delivering that care obviously has increased tremendously, and especially since 2020 has increased a lot. Labor costs have certainly gone up. Finding labor employees is definitely difficult. Ours is a field where our staff tend to be highly educated. You have to have a master's degree and be licensed primarily to deliver the services we do. To be able to qualify to pull down the government funding, generally, essentially the word is to be credentialed. And so the cost of labor has definitely gone up in the last couple years. We, as a hospital-based community mental health center, can get enhanced funding at times to help defray those costs. Those are called site of service fees. Interestingly enough, that's something that tends to be a little bit controversial in that some people feel like that is a cost increaser. But in our case, it actually is what makes up the difference sometimes between that 1997, 95 rate and today's costs. But you have to meet certain conditions in your clinic to be able to have that rate. You essentially have to have your building designed in a way that it could stand alone, kind of like a hospital. Our current location does not meet those qualifications. The cost to renovate it in a manner that could bring it up to the code to meet that were exorbitant, beyond our ability to do in that current location. Our lease had a 1-year tail on it to give notice, and so if we were going to give notice, it kind of came down to a timing issue that we had to give notice at that point in time. And so the timing of this could look a little bit unfortunate in that it came at the end of the year and it kind of came quickly. But as we looked into wanting to do something different and make a change, we knew we had to give notice. And at that same time, we felt like it was important to advise everybody of what we were doing. And so, so it could have felt abrupt in the manner in which it came, but those are essentially the context in which it was done. I can also say that for last year, our write-offs were $1.1 million, and our bad debt was $81,000 that's currently accruing at this point. And so you can see that all these things combined left us in a situation that we needed to restructure in a way that can make us more sustainable for the future. What we are planning to do is not decrease any of our services directly to the clients. One thing that COVID did allow us to do was be able to do virtual services in a way that we had never experienced prior to 2020. And we still have that capability. Actually, it's more enhanced now than it was prior to COVID. We can do a lot of therapies now virtually that we couldn't do prior to that. That is one of the areas in where billing and things like that did broaden up for us, is the ability to do some of that and to be able to collect on the revenues for that. The next thing is, and we've always been doing it, is community-based services. We'll continue to do that. We'll probably increase that. And that's where we provide services in the person's home or meet them in the community and do such. We still provide some school-based services, and we'll continue to do that. And then we have 2 other clinics, one in Tipton and one in Howard County. And obviously, we'll pick up people that need clinic services and bring them there. But those are how we plan to address that at this most, if I'm thinking about a now, a near and a far strategy, our now is we need to make this decision so that we can better position ourselves financially. The near is we need to work through this, and we're going to continue providing services, and we'll make sure we're not leaving clients unserved. And the far strategy is we've been through a similar situation in another county, and what we had to do was find a more appropriate time and a location where we could then reposition ourselves to reestablish ourselves again. And so that's kind of the decision that was kind of came, and I can feel that it came abruptly, but those are essentially the ingredients that came into the decision that we reached.
I really appreciate that explanation. I guess one question that I would have is, and I'm going to ask this out of ignorance, I don't know how your clients get referred to you, whether they're all from physicians or whether there's ever any walk-in traffic, or, is there any concern about not having a physical location impacting the ability of your clientele to know you're here? Or is that not a relevant, because someone always refers them to you? I don't know how that works.
No, I think that's a fine question to ask. Our clients get referred to us a number of different ways. We get some clients referred to us by the Department of Child Services, so through child welfare. We get clients referred to us from hospitals. One of the primary ways we get referrals are usually a client who's been at a hospital, usually in an acute care, and is now being discharged. And so we will remain that point of discharge and step down into services. The court system actually refers clients to us, and we'll still have the same process to be contacted. And so we will do that, and then we'll schedule our intakes. The other way is clients call us. Our access number won't have changed. And so clients call us, and then we schedule intakes. And then community organizations, none of those points on how people contact us will change in that regard.
Have to do is contact that direction. That's an automated system that direction.
Okay,
And we can have that, talk about that walk-in services, immediate service where they can
Okay.
be connected to the license.
great.
So then are you working out of your home, or are you coming from Howard or Tipton County or something, or?
Yeah, so the way that we're structured currently is we've had some of our therapists working. We have 4 therapists currently, 2 of them are coming to our Kokomo clinic. Give those home-based services that we talked about.
Okay.
As well as providing those virtual, I have Dr. Allison. I also just make sure and clarify, I think you mentioned Medicare 57%, it's Medicaid at 57%.
Yeah, sorry.
With 14% being Medicare, I wanna make sure I make that
Okay.
distinction as well. And so they'll be able to do virtual services, even if they're sitting in our Kokomo clinic or Tipton clinic, they'll be able to provide virtual services, which COVID has changed a lot of the way in which we operate, and that's one of the things that has really been beneficial, is to be able to do those virtual services, especially for individuals that have transportation needs, they couldn't even get to the clinic, things like that has been really helpful. And then to Danielle's point, going into the homes, meeting with individuals in the, community, which we've been doing anyway. We've been doing that for many, many years at all of our different clinics, is doing that community-based care, which is something that a community health center, it distinguishes us, we're able to do those type of services.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Just to give you some background from our side, we have a sizable number in our budget that helps support your services in the several hundred thousands of dollars. And we have had a struggle and a challenge in the past, having good communications back and forth to know what we're really getting for our investment. And so that was one of the reasons that we
Yeah.
wanted to try to foster some of that communication as we were at a point when there was going to be a change in the service model.
I think it's important to remember that one of the things as the community health center we can do is we have access to funding called Medicaid rehab option. It's the way the statute's written, only community health centers are able to do that. These Medicaid rehab option services are, think about them, when a person needs a lot of what we call skills development, maybe after an episode of being in the hospital or something like this, they need to relearn certain services, maybe even how to seek employment, how to remain employed, how to become employed, or sometimes as basic as how to care for themselves and cook and things like this. We can engage these skills. Sometimes it's about problem solving and just how you get along. And so we can bill for those services. Those services, the way Medicaid is set up for us, requires us to pay a match. So for essentially every $3 that we are able to pull down or bill, $1 has to be spent as a match to those funds. And because it's federal funds, we can't use any federal dollars to pay that match. So a lot of times, the county tax dollars are where those match dollars
Okay.
get applied so that we can then leverage those Medicaid dollars. It's complex in its arrangement. It's not something we've set up. It's something that we have to comply with. But it's a way, I oftentimes see it as a way to leverage federal dollars to deliver services at the local level. And so you can think a lot of times as those county tax dollars being multipliers to these other dollars. Happy to get into the complexities of that more, but I can say the money we get at the local level oftentimes turns into those match dollars that wouldn't be able to be pulled down if not for those local dollars to be able to match the federal dollars.
Okay, that's great to know.
Any other
And
questions?
Well,
That's a
I'd
great
just like to
explanation.
remind the board that I am on the advisory council, and I do attend quarterly meetings that they have. I don't really contribute an awful lot, I don't think, but at least I'm there having ears for the rest of the county. And my goal is to foster collaboration among, all the different entities, because this mental health thing is kind of complicated. There's so many different organizations out there that provide maybe one portion or another, and so my feeling is that it's very important for everybody to work together. As a matter of fact, one of the things I talked to Danielle about before the meeting last week was we were talking about with Carol Price coming on the council now and her experience with healthy communities and everything like that, possibility of actually adding her so there'd be two of us on their advisory council. Maybe that would be a good idea to have Carol's input in there too, as we help Community Howard make a transition to this new way of doing things.
Yeah, I will say this is probably the most important year at the legislature I've seen as it relates to behavioral health and mental health.
Yeah.
The governor's State of the State address tonight should address this briefly. Also, Senate Bill number 1, and if you understand how that works, Senate Bill number 1 being what the Senate believes is one of their key, most important bills, addresses mental health. And I think it's interesting that this was the year that they've chosen to do that, and it should transition, if it passes all the way through, how we deliver behavioral health services in the state of Indiana across the whole state. And it will be key. And the goal of that being hopefully to set up community health centers and service delivery providers with more sustainable funding. Right now, a lot of our funding, as I mentioned, it's not sustainable, hasn't adjusted in decades, or it's grant-driven, which means it's project-driven. If you understand how grants work, they start and they stop. And so the goal being to set up a more long-term sustainable funding and service delivery mechanism. So I will say as the public and as county officials, anything at the legislature that could progress the behavioral health, mental health agenda forward to reaching sustainable funding, I think would be critical. Because I totally meet you where you are, that the needs in our community seem to be growing a lot, and yet I do feel like things have been stagnant on the funding support level for a long, long time.
If you see critical things in those proposals as that goes through the process and amendments get added and changes are made, and you think that we need to be very vocal about a particular clause or
Sure.
language, please let us know.
Sure.
So that we can speak to it intelligently.
Yep.
Be happy to help. Any other questions? Thank you all for taking the time to come. Appreciate it very much.
Thank
That
you.
was very educational. It helped me a lot.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, George.
Okay. Now, Brett and Laura, we're ready for a report from the Opioid Settlement Fund Committee. And just to reset the scene here, you'll recall that the Attorney General's Office for the state of Indiana had reached an opioid settlement some time ago that brought in several hundred millions of dollars. Communities across the state were invited to sign up to be a part of that class action settlement, and Commissioner Brewer got Clinton County on the list so that we got a share of that money. You'll find in this presentation, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but we've had a really qualified group of people that have been working on this and have some recommendations and things for us to consider today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Laura and Brett and let them kind of talk about the process and what those recommendations are.
Yeah, so we just wanted to come today and kind of explain how we got together and came to these decisions. The goal of the committee was to look at the approved opioid remediation core strategies and the approved uses. So what came down were that these monies some of these monies had to be used for certain things. And if you aren't familiar, I do have those, and if you want a copy, I can give it to you. You can just let me know. And so what we did was I talked to Jordan months and months ago about this, prior to the fall, and, you know, it certainly wasn't reasonable to expect all of you to know what's going on in the community in all of these areas. And so what we talked about was getting a group of people together that would know. And so what we decided to do was look at this holistically and get people to the table that did know. And so those members of the committee are on that sheet here. Mayor Judy Sheets, Stephen Decker with Clinton County EMS, Cesar Munoz with the Frankfort Police Department, Ashley Kelly from the Sheriff's Department, Brett was on there, which was a huge help from Corrections, Nancy Ward and Matthew Risk kind of went in and out with probation when one of them was always there, Rodney from the Health Department, Macy Simmons from Inwell to help cover the medication-assisted treatment side and mental health, and then myself. And then I really also considered Jordan as part of the committee also. He wasn't able to attend the meetings because most of this was during harvest, so, but he kept in touch with emails for an input that way with us. A lot of work went into this. We met 5 times in person. All of those meetings were at the minimum. I think we had one meeting that lasted an hour. Most of them lasted close to 2 hours. And then there was lots and lots of work in between those meetings by all the members of the committee. A lot of research went into it. I want you to know, I mean, as far as, I mean, we were calling people, finding out what those organizations were doing as far as getting sustainability plans from organizations, financials from organizations, you know, what every organization was doing for medication-assisted treatment. I mean, there was a lot of research that went into all of this. So the core strategies that were examined are all of them that were listed in that Exhibit E from the state. And we went through every single one of these core strategies. And like I said, we did lots of research to see every single thing that was happening in every one of these core strategies in our county. And then we just looked at that and said, okay, what gaps in services do we have? And there were some things that we had gaps in services for, but we also didn't have a need for that. So that was okay, and those were gaps in services we decided we didn't need to address necessarily. But the noted gaps in services that we listed here are the things that we felt like were gaps in services that needed to be addressed with this funding. And it was a pretty long laundry list. I mean, I feel like overall we do a really great job in our community. And it was amazing to have all of these people at the table. I felt like it was good input, but even we solved problems just having these people at the table. That was some of the nice thing about it. We were able to make some connections and solve some gaps in services without putting funding at it, you know, just making some connections. So that was a nice outcome of this. But these were the gaps in services that we found after probably 3 of the meetings, I would say. After that, then we kind of came up with what we consider our recommendations, and these are just recommendations, okay? And we also felt like we wanted to assign dollar amounts to these based on the cost of these services. So we assigned for the restricted funds dollar amounts for those. We also wanted to recommend that you look at having accountability for these funds, because you are going to be held accountable for these funds as well. So you will be accountable to the state for what you do with these dollars, and you have to be able to prove that you did with the dollars what you said you would do, and that they fit under these recommended uses and approved uses. And so our recommendation is that you have a grant agreement or a memorandum of understanding of some sort with the organizations that you put in place with some reporting requirements, so that when you are having to report on these dollars, you'll have the information that you need. The committee also is available to reconvene in the future. Obviously, these funds decrease significantly after this first year, but this committee is willing to come back and reconvene for those funds if you'd like, or for recommendations on those, or for the non-restricted, or the reporting requirements, anything that you guys would find helpful, this committee is willing to do. And so we wanted to give you these numbers in full transparency with the city and county. We've given these numbers to the city as well. We feel like that's, you know, fair for you to know their numbers and them to know yours. Brett, you have anything you want to add?
On the distribution side, on the last page there, about probably 6 or 7 of those are actually split 50-50 between the city and the county. I did ask the mayor if there was any specific projects you wanted to fund. She said, no, we can just divide it up however you feel necessary. So I think we did a very good job on allocating where the money's going to go, and very proud of our work.
And some of those, I will say, like the training for first responders, who it's allocated to just happened to be the person who had the connection and had done trainings with those people before. So maybe FPD or EMS is the person who is gonna schedule that training and would be financially responsible and gathered the data, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't include all first responders.
Okay. Just to elaborate on a couple of things, so the amounts for the 2022 distribution, you'll recall that last year we set up a fund to receive these monies in as one of the actions that we took. Restricted funds that have to be used to the items that were in that document that Laura was holding up, and that is included in our, it's incorporated into our ordinance, those uses, allowable uses, is 103,000 for 2022, which matches the number you see here on the recommendation. We also received an additional 44,000 that is unrestricted in its use, and we're not making recommendations, or there are not recommendations on that, which I think is a good thing. We can hold that as something of a strategic reserve, see if, there's another area that presents itself, if there's another area that needs some reinforcements, if I like having that held back. But it does drop considerably next year, and I can forward you the link to the state. Jordan forwarded that, and Jordan, I don't know if you could do that real quick, even maybe send that out to the council, what you sent me. But
It's 18,000.
it goes down dramatically to 18,000 and like 7 unrestricted, I believe, and then kind of bounces around in that 20 to 25,000 through, I think, 2038, if I remember correctly. So we'll have some additional resources, but nothing on the scale of what this initial recommendation is.
And I will tell you also that because we are a drug-free community, which we're only one of 26 in Indiana, there are going to be some grant opportunities for communities that use 100% of their unrestricted for substance use disorder. There will be match opportunities.
Okay.
So if you decide to use that unrestricted 100% of it for substance use disorder, there are going to be grants coming that will allow those drug-free communities to apply for 100% match grants.
Great.
So that 44,000 would be doubled to 88,000. And that's only available to drug-free communities. So that's only 26 in Indiana, because Healthy Communities has a drug-free community grant. And then it would only be the ones who do 100% of non-restricted. So that then once again decreases that. So the chances that we would get those matching funds would be really high.
Yeah, great.
Question. Who would this committee stay involved in terms of writing those grants and just being on the lookout for opportunities? That's a difficult thing there, is just being aware of the grant opportunities and then having enough time and enough horsepower to get a grant written and submitted.
So those grants would come to Healthy Communities as the drug-free community recipient.
Okay.
So those are only available to drug-free community recipients. So they will come to the drug-free community recipients, and they're going to be available only to communities that are drug-free community and their cities or counties have used 100% of the unrestricted.
So we should guard this unrestricted money kind of carefully until we know otherwise for you.
Yeah, as long as it's not been used for unrestricted, you will qualify, is the way it's been explained to us in a conference call, so.
So I'd like to have 2 action items here. We can't do the official appropriation because we got to do our advertising and everything. And I want to be consistent with the process we established in the 23 budget for how we were handling the social services line items. We put that all into one lump sum, and then the commissioners are going to come up with a grant application process, and they would be responsible for divvying that up. I think we should do the same thing here. I think we should have a vote that we are appropriating the $103,500. The commissioners then would have the grant application and the kind of that oversight responsibility that you referenced, and I think is absolutely going to be important. And then I'd like to have a second action item where we as a council commit that we're willing to say today on the record that 44,000 of unrestricted is going to go to the same purposes as the restricted. I think we should put that whole amount to work. And if we have I thought that before I knew there were leverage opportunities, but if there's leverage opportunities, to me, that's even more of a no-brainer. But that's not actually officially being requested today. I'm just saying proactively, I think we should go on the record as making that commitment. So with that being said, you've seen, yes, Stephen.
Can I just add in
Sure, yeah, let me open that up to any of you folks in here that have been on that working group.
I just, to echo what you just said and kind of what Laura and Brett have been presenting, you know, we just heard from Healthy Communities that we potentially are losing some substance use and mental health. You know, they said that they're negative $81,000. Well, our 40,000, double it if we get the grant. You know, we're filling in that gap. Pledge that. Use as well.
Okay, good point. Rodney or Ashley, anything that you either would like to add?
I think we solved some other issues. Yes, Medicaid issues. So,
Yeah, and that's when I was saying other problems were solved. I mean, we were able to meet with the jail providers about some sustainability for peer recovery and billing through them. And I mean, we were able to start some men support groups that are getting ready to start in the jail. And this was a great thing to happen that solved some problems that didn't use any of this funding, and all the people who came together at the table for this group, it was great. I mean,
Good.
I was really, I mean, I think we should be proud of the work that happened on that committee. Everybody worked really hard.
That's really encouraging. Well, then I'd like to ask for a motion that we support the appropriation of $103,050 for opioid addiction services.
I'll make that motion.
Okay,
I'll second.
I have a motion by Clark and a second by Todd. Any other questions before we have the vote?
Yes.
Yeah.
How
go.
about, double the grant, as far as I'm saying, limit the amount of money the first time, so they put out there what they really want, and then, so if you need 80,000, you're gonna get 40, and then apply for a second grant to make sure that we have their data. Is that feasible? Is that something that we?
As part of that accountability.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're accountable for it. That's something that I don't,
Would that be more up to the commissioners?
I think that would be more up to the commissioners in the role of those grant assurances and the grant application process.
Yeah.
What our role would be is we've got to make that money appropriated and eligible to be spent. And that's kind of what I want to focus on here at the moment. But that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So I do have a motion and a second that we support the funding of the 103,050.
Yeah, with Clark and
With
Todd.
Clark and Todd.
Okay.
So all those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. And then if you all feel comfortable, like I do, that we as a council commit that we would be willing to appropriate that additional, what is unrestricted funds for the same uses, for that same opioid addiction services, I think that could be very helpful for not only the commissioners to know, but for Laura to know when those grant opportunities come in, that she has that opportunity.
I'm glad you suggested it. I think it's a great idea, and I'll make that motion if other guys don't mind
Okay.
as well.
I have a motion by Clark that we commit the unrestricted for the same purposes as the restricted. I have a second by Joe. All of those in favor, raise your right hand. That motion carries. Yours was up?
Yes, sir.
6-0. So, okay. Thank you for the time coming in and all the time you put in, to all of you guys on this. It's really important. So, thank you.
I'll make one more comment. There was an article in the Indianapolis Star over the weekend about what other counties are doing with this money, and I'm really proud of what I saw here and listening to your presentation. You've put as much thought into this as or more than some counties that got 10 times as much money. So I think that's great.
Before we leave the topic, Jordan or Bert, either of you care to make any comments? I didn't mean to.
Well, I think Joe hit it on it, but the accountability from even the state will come back on the commissioners. This was kind of the first step to get that money out the door so it could be used, and they're gonna come to our meetings and make these recommendations so that we can get it out in the community and working. But the second thing about the committee is it would be my vision that through our general regulations, we put this as an ordinance to form this committee, and we have the set pieces or the set representatives, since it's over 18 years, and
Yeah.
a lot of us will change positions over that time, so it'll be established that there's a committee to look at those funds, even though it is only 18,000 to 25 over the next few years, that we continue to meet and look at those and bring the recommendations to council and commissioners like we have.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. Next up, Recorder's Perpetuation Fund Ordinance. Beth, what do you have for us?
Well, at conference, and Recorders Conference this year, last year, we were learning that it's not sufficient enough just to have an affidavit saying that some of the funds from that perpetuation fund can be used to pay expenses from the general fund. So they said that we needed an ordinance too. State Board of Accounts suggested that, so.
Did they give you a
that's-
draft or a template or anything?
No,
like
they
that?
didn't.
Okay.
But Tom was able to come up with one very quickly.
Oh,
And
so you didn't-
I have been in communication with Carroll County. I've seen
I missed
hers.
that. Yeah.
Hers is just one page, slightly different, but this kind of helps to
Okay.
keep it all
Now,
formal.
This is formalizing our processes that we've already been doing.
Yeah, and I think the affidavit is where it gets
This-
detailed or, can be more specific.
The affidavit lists the specific spending and this, yeah. Okay. Okay. You all are familiar with the process we go through with the perpetuation fund. Well, Todd, would you like me to? Do you
I'll
want me to-
take a explanation of
The,
it, Alan.
the Recorder's Perpetuation Fund is unique in all of the funds in county government in that it requires two keys to turn before it's actually implemented. The council appropriates the money and the recorder has to sign off on the spending of that money as well. And so, previously, the way we've handled that is that, the recorder will bring to us a recorder's affidavit that is their signature that they concur with the spending that we put in at budget time. So this is I guess another form of internal control. I guess the state's always big on those forms of internal control that gives us another layer of documentation that sets the rules to the game of how that all works from that fund. So it's a unique animal, that particular fund. So with that being said, I'd entertain a motion to approve the fund. Do we have a fund ordinance? Is this 01? 02, okay.
I make a motion that we pass ordinance number 2023-02.
Okay, have a motion by Jeff. Do I have a second? Second by Mike. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next, a little housekeeping. As we start 2023, we have some board appointments that with the changeover on the council, we need to make some adjustments to our appointment schedule. And you have a list of those. I've talked to several of you to ask if you're willing to step into certain roles. And so let me just kind of report on those. Most of these are council members serving in positions, but we do have a couple outside organizations, Myron Cheesem on the Alcohol Beverage Board and Nick Bales on Property Tax Board of Appeals, PETA BOA. Those would be nominated for another term. Jake had formerly served on the Frankfurt Economic Development Commission. We appointed him last year. They were repopulating that commission. I've asked Jeff if he was willing to serve in that role as a city resident, and he is. Mike has agreed to continue serving on the Community Corrections Board. Jake also served previously on the American Disability Act Board, and I've asked Joe if he would be willing to step into that role, and he is willing to do so. The SHARP Committee, the Senior Housing Program, where seniors can get grants for home improvements. John Hussey had been our previous council member representative there. Jeff has agreed to step into that role. But since we've assigned him a couple of other roles, Jeff has asked if he could step back from the Healthy Communities appointment. And Carol obviously would be a natural to step into that role, and she was okay with doing that. So we would appoint Carol Price to the Healthy Communities position for the county. One thing that we're not, as we tried to track down, we aren't sure if we really need to make an appointment or whether we just don't have our list updated, but we show that we need to reappoint Clark also to the Solid Waste district position. So that one was not highlighted, but let's add that to our list. And then on the last one is the County Redevelopment Commission. We have two appointees, Jim Need and Mark Hodges, who are both willing to continue, and so we would reappoint them to another term of service. I believe that's, PIP. So Todd would take John's position, John Hussey's position on the Partners in Progress Board representing the council, and Todd's agreed to take on that role. So that would be our slate of appointees. And I guess I don't feel there's any need to vote on those one at a time. If you all feel comfortable appointing that slate, I'd entertain a motion just to approve that slate of appointees.
I make a motion to approve all the appointed people to all the boards.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Jeff to approve that slate of council appointments. A second by Joe. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Puts us in good shape for another year. That moves us to additional appropriations. We have a few, it's early in the month, but the few that we have are mainly some of those items that come up at budget time that weren't advertised, and we need to we put them in the budget, but we need to let the paperwork catch up with some of those items. So bear with me here. First one, $2,000 for the recorder's salary. You'll recall that we did make an adjustment to the recorder's salary that had not been advertised, so we need to additional appropriate an additional $2,000 to make that number work in the salary ordinance. We do have, that's all for county general. We do have a new gift, very generous gift of $6,000 from Encompass Credit Union to the county home for use of the residents, so we need to appropriate $6,000 from the gifts fund for Chris to use. From Cume Cap, $71,000. This again, with dealing with the recorder, Todd, we made a deal, I guess you'd say, with the recorder, and this goes back to that perpetuation fund, that we needed to digitize another block of records, and the recorder agreed to take half of that expense out of the perpetuation fund, and we're taking the other half out of our Cume Cap fund. So that's, we're executing on our part of that agreement. And we also, the clerk's office had asked for $13,800 for the use of iPads in the election process, and we asked if we couldn't remove that from the general fund, and we're putting it in the Cume Cap fund, but we had more available funding. So this was a removal from one, and we moved it into another one. From Lit Public Safety, we added, we had a substantial increase in the amount of the fuel budget, and so to the extent that we needed to boost the sheriff's office fuel budget, we put that in that amount of $30,000 in the public safety lit. So this was catching up with that from budget time. Britt, I'm going to ask you to help me make sure I don't get messed up here on we had one of these pauper attorney funds that the judge wanted to remove or withdraw. Is it this 136 or was it the 118?
No, it's the one.
Okay, so this one, the 136,000, we get money that goes into our pauper attorney fund from two sources. One is from when judges issue cash bonds. People pay those bonds, and part of that money goes as restitution for pauper attorney funds that the county expended on their behalf. Those monies go into a fund, and Judge Moeller is asking that we appropriate those monies for use for this year's pauper attorney fees with this $136,000. We also get money from the State Public Defender Commission. That is pauper attorney fees the county expends. We can submit those to the state and get a 40% reimbursement if we meet certain requirements. But this is for our locally received funds of $136,079. Lit Correctional Facility, you'll remember that at budget time we moved $100,000 out of the general fund budget to the Lit Corrections Facility to have some additional funding for repairs to the building. So that is being appropriated with this one. Nancy's continued to have great success with the Trex program. We've received $14,624.33 into the probation budget, and we're appropriating that money here. Todd, for your benefit, the Trex program, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
doing it
Okay, great.
as well.
Great. Yeah, it's been a huge success for us.
Yeah, that's what we've heard, so we're following suit,
Okay,
and
good.
doing the same thing.
Okay, good. Probation, $5,000. This is a grant that had some carryover funds that we're appropriating for 2022, $5,000 from the MRT grant. One item that did slip through the cracks of the budget process was we did not appropriate our match for the Community Crossings 2023 program. So we have a $300,000 appropriation so that we make sure we have when we fully expect that we'll get that funding for this year, and we want to make sure we've got our match ready to go when that is needed. $300,000 for that. This next one, what am I missing here?
The 118,000 from the judge.
Am I missing?
Is that the one that-
Am I missing the, I have a note over mine that says, this is the one, yeah, this is the one we talked about yesterday, that the judge, he just wants to pull that back and withdraw that from our consideration. So actually, I'm gonna ask for a motion that we deny, and I can't see the number because I have a copy.
It's
of mine.
$118,838.84.
So could I have a motion to deny that one?
So moved.
Okay. I have a motion by Clark to deny that request. Do I have a second? Second by Mike. So all those in favor, raise your right hand. That one will get brought up next
Okay.
month with some changes and modifications. Extension, $16.60. This actually looks like it should have been an encumbrance maybe, or something that says to cover payroll from last year. Okay, it does go into the transfer. I'm sorry, thank you for catching that. So that is the last of the additionals then. So we did
It's
not, we
tricky
did not,
working out of that binder, isn't it?
it is tricky working out of the binder. Okay, so we denied that last one, so if you, the slate of additionals would be all except for that last one, and that would be, ordinance number, or resolution number 2023-01.
Make a motion to pass.
Okay, a motion by Jeff, do I have a second? Any questions on any of them? Let me just ask that first. I'll defer, I want to make sure you have as much of an explanation as you need.
I think I'm good.
Okay, so do I have a second with that being said? Second by Mike. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. We do obviously have a couple of transfers here. The $16.60 in extension, transferring between some payroll positions to make sure the money was in the right line. $250 in the council budget from the HSA line to the Social Security and Medicare line. Superior Court, $12,000 from interpreter, the general interpreter position to the newly created specific person interpreter position to fund that salary. $4,500 in circuit court from witness fees to that new interpreter position. $4,000 from Judge Moeller's generic interpreter to the newly created interpreter position for payroll. Circuit Court, $9,079 from wraparound, from the, I don't know what preserve, do you know, I can't tell what that one is. Looks like it's going from a service to a person's, to a payroll.
Part-time.
Yeah, going to a
Part-time
payroll.
employee.
It's for a payroll match to qualify for the CASA grant. Sheriff's Office, $5,899.99 from jailers to overtime. From dispatch, $3,637.88 from group medical to overtime. And that is the last of the transfers. So I would entertain a motion to approve that slate of transfers.
So move it.
Got a motion by Joe,
Second.
second by Jeff. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Okay. Any council reports, anything of note that anybody attended, participated in since our last get-together?
Well, I think Jordan helped me out on this a little bit, but I think it's important to tell the council that we did at the Area Plan Commission, take recommendations, that Liz had spent several months putting together, updating our fees. We did establish a new, I'm not gonna get into details, Liz will, if anybody has any questions or wants to see the schedule, check with the Area Plan Commission, but, that was discussed during budget time, and I thought it'd be important to just make you aware that we did update our fee schedules. I think Liz did a nice job, comparing our county to like counties around us, and not being the highest fee, but being,
Middle of the pack.
yeah.
I see Liz snuck in there at some point. Anything
Well, hi
else you'd
Liz,
like
I
to-
didn't even know you were here.
Anything else you'd like to
Do you wanna
add?
say anything?
I think overall,
There goes Mike.
Sorry about that. I think overall Clark covered it pretty well. Council had requested, of course, that if we were doing the adjustment on fees, that we try to make a 10% adjustment. And as it ended up, because we did, as Clark mentioned, we made larger adjustments on some things. So we hadn't done a comprehensive look at our fee schedule in over a decade. So it's time. So overall, we made between a 25 and a 30% increase on fees across the board. Now, all areas are not equal. We did look at the fact that, with what our median income is here in Clinton County, what types of permits are those of our citizens who live below that median income line most likely to need. So permit types like electricals, which we get a lot of those, when people get power cut, for a variety of reasons, and they need to get that power turned back on, portable sheds, and above-ground swimming pools, people get the kit from Walmart and put it up. Those permit fees, we didn't make any changes to, because those are the kinds of things that people living below that median income level might need or do just to make improvements to their quality of life, that the amounts are already large to them, when they come in. But other areas, new houses, in-ground pools, commercial, industrial, hearing applications, we made larger adjustments too. So across the board, you're looking at about a 25 to 30% increase.
All right, thank
And
you.
yeah, if you have any questions or you want to see it, feel free to reach out.
Okay, thank you. I see that I skipped over a line item, our monthly financial report that we get in our packet. Todd, just as a brief explanation, we get you have it in front of you, we get that report, we receive it from the auditor's office each month, and it's another one of those things we do for internal controls for the purposes of the State Board of Accounts. They like to know that the auditor informed us of all of the account balances on a monthly basis. So we don't approve or take any action other than we typically, for the record, will have a vote saying that the auditor provided us with that data and we received it.
Okay.
So I would entertain a motion that we've
I
received.
make a motion, it's been received.
So I have a motion. Do I have a second by Joe? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 6-0. Commissioner report. Anything else? Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
A couple things, I'll make it quick. So I would expect over the next month or so that you guys will start to see a lot of paperwork for the annex project. They're starting to really move forward with that, so I believe some public notice and such will be coming your guys' way, so just want to keep you updated on that. The second thing is the commissioners approved a contract for a communication consultant. Todd would be the only one that probably doesn't know this, but in the budget, under the landfill tipping, so it's not any of the tax dollars, similar to our HR consultant, we will now have a communication consultant. So her name is Tammy Sander. She currently works with other municipalities, but Hamilton County being one of them. She couldn't be here today. I'll bring her to your meeting in February to introduce her. But at first, she's going to be at the disposal of the commissioners and council from a communication standpoint, and as she gets more comfortable over time, we're going to expand it out to all the offices. So I just wanted to let you guys know and put that on your horizon that next month she'll be here to do an introduction.
Okay. Good. That's good news. Thank you. Department heads. Any department heads need? I always look over here first.
They want to get in quick and get out, okay. A few things from the sheriff's office. probably the most important things.
The 2022 commissary report. This is historically the 8th report from the sheriff's office over my term to present that. And you also received out, Mr. President Dunn, the electronic version with the spreadsheet
Okay.
that you can go through, and it should be easily shared and looked through with a ledger, so that there's nothing else that would need to be done. But I've asked Alan to send that to each one of you so that you can go through it and take a look at it. But I'll present this currently to you now. And here's the commissary report for
Great,
the last of the year for 2022.
thank you.
Fantastic. Before we get into the other portions, before I forget, there's a couple things. I'm glad a couple commissioners are here. The fire suppression system at the jail will be, we're going to get some bills because it needs some maintenance. So what I'm going to let you, I'll leave it up there with you, Alan, and I'll get a copy to the commissioners as well. But Corson's Fire and Security will come in. It will go through the system. There are some systems that need to be updated and upgraded and also repaired. And this initial bill is going to be around $3,300, and it's going to be just to do the exploratory. And I say that because they've got to go through the suppression system, make sure it's working correctly. So that's a part of it. The other part of it is on Harrison Street, we do have a pit that solid waste goes through. We've, in years past, and way before our time, and I'm glad you're on here as a new councilman, so Mr. Corey, so that you can kind of delve into this too, because we're going to have to deal with it. The solid waste, and I'm talking about trash, other things like that go into that pit. We've reached out, I've put my maintenance people on notice, and they've reached out to probably the 20 surrounding counties to try, from Indianapolis towards Chicago, for a company to come in and do the clean out. A lot of them refuse to do it because they have nowhere to take that other solid waste. When the facility was built, there was no chopper system put into it. So we're on borrowed time here. If that system fails that's on Harrison Street, then the city has to deal with the sewage, and we have to deal with a lot of other issues. Talking about the residences, because it's tied there. We have two systems that go out. One's basically administrative, and the other portion is a jail, and that's the pit on Harrison Street. So we've got to, I've got a company that's going to come in. They're going to give us an estimate on what a chopper would cost to safely transfer that, what's left of that solid waste, into the city system. So that's probably one of the most important things. And I'm going to turn this over to Ashley Kelly. She's my matron. She's also the commissary manager, and she'll answer the questions that you have regarding medical. We're going to go over some medical savings that is just phenomenal. And I can't express how, much gratitude I have for the work that's been done by our staff regarding commissary, and also our medical staff. And our medical staff and a company that we contract has stepped out and helped with the opioid process. And I'll let Ashley talk a little bit about that, since she attended those meetings, and their willingness to help them with a lot of billing issues that were able to be satisfied. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley.
Hello. Just our typical end of the year numbers. So the federal inmate program brought in $1,184,693.06. We're currently sitting on 45 beds as of this morning. The 22 commissary deposits were $535,800.20, excuse me. And then the medical savings, this is not including the pharmacy, because our company actually branched out and created their own pharmacy company within QCC. So the annual 22 totals, all inmate medical billing, was $406,357.21. You've heard me say over the last couple of years that we rebill those medical bills for the state statute, the federal Medicare rate plus 4%. You might remember that from last year. So after we've repriced all of that, that $406,000 went down to $17,704.21. And then the amount returned to the county was $723.25. That's for DOC and at level 6 reimbursements, and 100% of that was sent to the state for reimbursement. So that's a 95.64% savings. We paid approximately 4 cents on the dollar. Anybody has any questions?
That's awesome. Thank you.
We were happy with those numbers this year.
Is that reflected in the line in the budget where we have the inmate medical then?
So the 0006, there's that.
And I don't have my budget book, I'm sorry.
It's listed as medical and hospital or
Yeah,
something
yeah,
to that
yeah.
effect. So we initially pay those that are returning. So we restructured the billing so that our off-site cap is being met with all county bills because we have the reimbursement capability with the state, and then the feds pick up their own medical bills. It doesn't come through us. So the state billing is what's sent in excess of the off-site cap. If we exceed the off-site cap every quarter, those bills come to us, but we try to make it the level 6 offenders, the DOC reimbursements, and then we will submit for the reimbursement from the state. So the only amount out of pocket for medical bills last year was that $723.25, and 100% of that is DOC reimbursement, which we sent to DOC for the state to pay us back.
So, but it would show in our budget that we spent the money out and then there's an offsetting reimbursement that comes back,
Yes,
right?
it
That's how
should.
it works?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
And then the rebilling, that 406,000 repriced down to the 17,000, that's because of the statutory, the federal Medicare plus 4%. That's illegal or improper billing, using double medical codes on the same procedure, things of that nature.
Wow. Any questions?
It's outstanding.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And I did receive the email with the commissary report. Yeah, I think you sent it this morning, and so I'll forward that on when we get done.
I will say the cover sheet for that indicates that that is not a reconciled report. Alice did confirm she was able to reconcile it yesterday. She received the bank statements yesterday, and the numbers are accurate.
Okay.
So if you have any questions, let us know.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions for the sheriff's office?
So what's your timeline you thinking on the chopper situation then?
We should have an estimate or a bid or what the work would be. So I'm guessing probably in the next few months. I would guess that by the end of this week, I'll have a guess, because I think it's one of our local, not our local, but one of our typical mechanical contractors that we've used in the past, but they're going to provide us an estimate on what it would cost and how we could, quickly get to it. So, and equipment, things like that, to order something like that. Mr. Corey, you may be more familiar with that. I don't know how long it would take to get the product. It'd be months.
We don't get involved in choppers and everything. Well, we have them in our lifters.
Right.
And things like that. But, I know we just ordered some and they actually airshipped them in from Europe. to
Thanks.
us. Yeah.
So maybe we
They're a lot-
can we lease loan that? So
They're a lot bigger than what you're gonna require. But
Right.
is the pit full right now?
it is, it's actually holding pretty well, but it needs addressed. I mean, I'm talking in the next 6 months to 8 months, we need to address it. Because if we do have a failure at that point, we are going to affect every resident on Harrison Street. And I think we've had that in the past, way before any of us were sitting in these offices. And it's something that maybe Sheriff Hensley can recall, but it was a mess. And we don't want that to fall into we don't want that in our community.
Right.
To say the least. So with that, we should have by the end of the week an estimate, and then we can get a time frame probably over the next month, and we'll get with the commissioners and see where we're at and what we can get done.
It was listed as part of the jail feasibility study. It was one of the items that the engineers stated we needed to address. We don't have a.
I think that'd be the most reasonable and the best way to address it, because right now we do have an issue with most of the companies that we've contacted will not come and do that work because they're solid that they have to take with them and destroy or whatever the case is.
Yeah, they don't have anything to do with it. Yeah.
No.
One thing that can be done, because, we can't, I'll put on my utility hat right now. Since that's actually past the curb line, we can't come and clean the pit out. If we do, we have to do it for the restaurants and for their grease traps and everything like that. But we can take the waste, because we have a dump station out at the wastewater plant. but the county now has a vac truck. If it comes into dire need that it needs to be sucked out, they could suck it out, and then we could take the waste out there.
I got volunteers, we might be able to get it all done.
Very good. Yeah.
Commissioner?
So that was gonna be my suggestion is, I think we can get the quote on the chopper, but it seems like, more financially feasible option would be to use the back truck that we traded for last year, and maybe we have it sucked out every quarter instead of every 4 or 5 years now.
Fantastic.
The
Rick?
last time it was done was June of '21, so you're going a year and a half right now, so I'm sure it's neat
Yeah.
and done, but it can be done, and, it can be dumped out in our pit. It'll make a mess and it'll be some cleanup, but it can be dumped out in our pits.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, I think what's the rough cost to dump out there?
It's either I think it's $35 or $50, one of the two. We had some price increases and I can't keep up with it, but
We'll do
it's,
that.
it's,
4 times a year.
Sold.
Rick, I have a CDL, I can get your back truck. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, thank you
Okay.
for everything, looking forward to 23.
All right, thank you. Anybody else, Stephen? That's a big,
Rich made it look, real easy.
Oh, yeah. He came at the end of the year. He wanted to talk to us then.
should not
So we
today.
see.
See,
Yeah,
I didn't realize that the last one was like the,
Yeah,
a
we're not
formality kind of.
Yeah.
We're not really open for business.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've seen this.
Okay. So,
This'll make your eyes blur.
unfortunately, you don't know what you don't know. And I wish I started a little bit sooner so I could have had a better idea going into the budget season. But with a lot of reflection on 22, trying to figure out how to make our system better as a whole. The way we've done it previously is we've done self-scheduling, which puts our employees at 104 shifts per year. Everywhere else has a fixed schedule. Whether you do 12-hour shifts on a 2-2-3 rotation, 7 on, 7 off, or if you're working 24s, 24 on, 48 off, 24 on, 24 off, 48.96. And I feel like for us to keep up with the times and be a more efficient system, we have to reevaluate how we are currently scheduling our staff. One of the complications associated with this is the FLSA laws. The fire departments and law enforcement have exemptions from the 1990s, but EMS wasn't much of a thing in 1990s as it is today, and unfortunately we aren't grandfathered in, and so we don't have these exemptions, and so we have to pay overtime outside of 40 hours a week. So that was one of the hurdles looking at this, but to go from 104 annual shifts self-scheduling to a 48.96 rotation for all of our employees, it takes us from requiring 14 full-time paramedics and 14 full-time EMTs to 12 and 12. And so ultimately it trims us 4 employees, which trims us on sick time, vacation time, personal time, as well as employee benefits. And this system also allows me to accurately project our overtime per year. It also gives us the ability to transition from scrambling to get the schedule posted for next month on, 2 weeks before, the week before the month starts, to I can now put together a schedule for an entire year, and I know what the year looks like for everybody. So I've had conversations with all 3 commissioners, as well as a conversation with Alan on this. As you can tell, I've really dove into the numbers and, truly looked at how this was gonna impact us. And there's a slight modification that I propose. So instead of increasing our employees by 16 shifts per year, we would increase them 13 shifts per year. And basically the way it would work is every 6 weeks, they get a day off. And we could fill that truck with part-time staff alternatively. So with that, it would end up costing our budget more, $10,312, or $10,312.40 is what it would end up costing us more. Without that modification and just doing 120 shifts per year, it would end up costing us $45,000 more. So, the 3 commissioners, if I can speak for you guys, were very supportive of this idea. I think that the staff is very excited. Most of the staff is very excited to look at a fixed schedule and have an idea of what their entire year looks like. what was tough was, taking on the reins of this system where staff members were promised to only work Sunday, Monday, Thursday, Friday of 1 week. And they weren't willing to compromise that at all. So we had staff members that they never knew what their schedule looked like, whereas some other people knew exactly what their fixed rotation was, and they weren't willing to give any additional availability. And when we were super short-staffed, this was a really easy problem to navigate because there were always openings. But over the course of the last year, we became fully staffed, and that flexibility did not work anymore. And, or that lack of flexibility did not work anymore. And so with this, I would like to propose that we basically overhaul my 100 line item budget to reflect the 4896 rotation. It's a better system for EMS as a whole as well as the county.
I'd like to add something to mentioned this, I think, but one of the issues that we've had since we created the Boylston station is it being understaffed. The number of, we met in early December, so I'm sure this has changed, it was close to like 80 days in 2022, right?
Yeah.
That it had no staff at that facility. By going to this new schedule, it will shrink that down to a maximum of 25-ish days, I believe.
Correct.
But it will have the opportunity for individuals to pick up overtime and pick up those days. But we know that the minimum will be 25 days. And also, Stephen ran all the data points, and Thursdays are the day that are the least call volume for that side of the county. So he has it strategically scheduled so that those 25 days are always on a Thursday. So he's put a lot more time and effort into the analytics to come up with this decision, and that's why I believe all the commissioners at this point support it as well, as just providing a little more stability to that department in terms of their schedule.
I think another benefit is the benefit it would have for the auditor's office to simplify things, which, we've had kind of a hodgepodge of how we've handled some things, and this gets it into a uniform, predictable. I think we'll have some savings on just the predictability of vacation scheduling, the coverage for vacations and those kinds of things. So we went into a lot more depth in this at the meeting we had in December, and I was fully on board with it as well. It seems like a big, giant step forward. Commissioner Weaver.
Echoing what you're saying, Alan, even though it may be a slight increase in our cost, the time and management side is going to greatly be reduced, both on, our auditing staff and on our staff. So his time and effort of putting those schedules together is going to be tremendously less time involved. So I think in the long run, it's going to save him a tremendous amount of scheduling time.
Yeah, I'll say, we started rolling EMTs onto this because we had a lot of discussion as a whole service in December on this. And, just planning ahead, we ended up having 2 staff members, or 3 total full-time staff members leave in December, 2 based on the projection of us going to this and enforcing this for all staff members. And then we had 1 that ended up going to Frankfurt Fire. But with this, we are still fully staffed today if we implement this change. And, for the first time since I've been an employee of Clinton County, we have the schedule posted through April already. So, no exaggeration, there was times where, 3 days into the month was when the schedule was posted. And people were just showing up thinking this is the day they were supposed to work. Whereas this system, this is the solution.
Can I ask one question? So are
Yeah.
we had discussed the idea was to roll this out in July. Are you planning on doing this earlier now, or is the thought still to wait until July to make this kind of the mandatory process?
So with the 2 EMTs leaving, it left us with 12 EMTs, and that's exactly what we need. So we went ahead and we put all EMTs on the schedule as it is, to the 4896. Conversing with the paramedics, there are some that have part-time businesses and they've planned their year out accordingly, thinking that they were going to be on this fixed rotation that they were promised when they were hired in. And so what they've said is, if we can have until September. And so we kind of looked at the magic number on what how many paramedics can we put on this without forcing everybody to go to it? Because if we put too many on it, then everybody's forced into it regardless. And what we have found is we can do 6 or 7. And so right now, we have half of our paramedics that are actually working it. And so that leaves us, the way it falls, it just falls perfect. We have 1 paramedic shift open a week. So,
We have a couple of options, I would say, budgetarily, as far as how to, we could be really official with this and have you refigure the numbers. Well, you've already refigured the numbers, but we could essentially redo the budget. And if we had to, reduce one and raise another, we could do all that. Or we could be a little more flexible on it. We leave the budget as it's approved, and we make adjustments through the transfer process, or we additional towards the end of the year to reflect, where different priorities are. Do you have a preference on how you'd like, would you like to codify this, so to speak, by really almost refiguring your budget and doing it under this new scenario, or do you want to kind of have that flexibility to kind of change as we go this first year and put this all into effect next year?
With all due respect, the budget has to stand up.
We could do additionals or reductions.
yeah.
That is, sort of the same thing as your second. You know what I mean? You can't, submit a whole new one
Okay.
to the state. We have to remain within just additionals or transfers or.
Well, maybe I said that wrong. I guess I was saying, do we want to go ahead and knowingly now, in January, do those additionals and reductions to get money in the right lines? Or do we want to go through the year knowing that maybe this line's going to run out in November, and this line's going to have money left, and we're just going to handle it as a transfer in November?
Just saying, do a new budget kind of panicked me.
Well,
Sorry.
Poor
speaking on my behalf.
But
I think, so another thing that Britt and Cecily and I have talked about is that for our health insurance, so we budgeted really heavy on that. And the way we did it was just assuming that every employee would pick the most expensive plan that would cost the county the most money. But when we looked at it, I think the most we have spent is $145,000, and we're budgeted for like $260,000. So we have a little over $100,000 of wiggle room right there where we can move that funding into these line items. The only one that I see an issue with is the supervisor, because that increases the line item by $30,000. But the paramedic, it's actually a decrease by $30,000, and EMTs, it's an increase by $3,000.
So my thinking was, is if we know that today in January, do we go ahead and make that adjustment?
I guess, what
Or
do you want to
we
do?
wait until the money runs out and the one that's going to be short, and we?
Just wait? Okay. So yeah, overall, the supervisor line item would increase by $30,000, and our overtime line item would increase by $40,000. And then I did put at the bottom of this analysis how much we lose in overtime per year if we're down 1 paramedic versus 1 EMT, kind of analyzing that and how condensing the service staff-wise is actually going to be our most efficient, cost-efficient option.
Okay, so we don't need to take any action of any kind. This is more of an FYI. Okay, just want to make sure I'm clear.
Well, I really don't have a question. I guess I'm kind of shocked to know that the county built the EMS building in Boylston that was unmanned for 80 days. And then if we put in this system that sounds like it's the thing to do, it's still unmanned for 25. And to think that emergency services on a Thursday are not going to happen, because that's kind of the general consensus of reports.
Yeah, so let me expand on that a little bit. So I know in the budget season, I think it was Clark that said, hey, let's talk about this. I'm getting some phone calls about the Boylston station. When we have call-offs, when we have people that are scheduled for vacation and we can't get staff to pick up the shift, unfortunately, I'm stuck in the dilemma of playing the odds game. Unfortunately, and I'm not trying to say like one part of the community is less valuable or doesn't deserve that type of service. What it puts us in a predicament because the ambulances here in Frankfort average 10 calls per shift, and the ambulance out in Mulberry averages 3 per shift, and then the truck in Boylston, it averages 1 911 call per shift, 1 per shift, and 1 transfer as well, because that's our first truck for non-emergency transfers. And And so it puts us in this, where are we most likely to get a call? And that's in city limits as well as Mulberry and Rossville is where we're statistically most likely to get a call. And then I look at it a little bit further and I go, okay, so we don't have an ambulance at the Mulberry Fire Station. That's a BLS truck. It's just Clinton County EMS that staffs that station. And then Rossville, they are struggling like everybody else in the first responder world of getting volunteers to respond to calls. But then I look at Ambulance 6 and Ambulance 13. Ambulance 13 is running at an unprecedented rate of any of our volunteer ambulance services. And then Ambulance 6 has always been very consistent in their response too.
Which communities are those? Is that Michigan Town,
That's
Kirkland?
Forest is where Ambulance 13 is located, and then Kirkland is Ambulance 6.
Okay.
So it's not that we're leaving that side of the county unattended and uncared for. We're relying on our volunteers to respond and reduce the times to our response times, and we're always sending an ambulance. Somebody calls 911, an ambulance is being sent from Clinton County EMS. And so I hate to say it, but when I look at the odds, I would much rather us staff a truck that is going to go see 10 patients versus the one that is going to see one. And it's all about our response time estimations as well. So, Medic, prior to the Boylston station being built, we always responded from Frankfurt. And I think it's a tremendous, opportunity for the community to benefit from those services with the Boylston station because it reduces our response time from 25 minutes to about 10 to 15, depending on, I'm just thinking like the furthest part of the county. We can be there within minutes if it's in Michigan Town and even Kirkland, truly. And so, though it's a tremendous benefit, I guess looking at the cost analysis, what I was apprehensive of is coming in and saying, hey, can I get $50,000 more to do this, as well as taking our staff that have been used to 104 shifts per year and saying, hey, now you have to work 120, without acknowledging, hey, we're doing a huge system revamp as well as increasing the amount of hours our staff is having to work. So I was trying to be gracious with that. The priority is still always to staff the truck and just rely on our part-time employees to fill those voids. We've got 5 part-time paramedics, and we've just hired, over the last 4 months, we've hired multiple part-time EMTs who are really eager to pick up. And so I think just filling those voids with them is, a great cost benefit to the service. But I guess if you guys want us to reevaluate that and just say, hey, we're doing 120 shifts, I can relay that to the staff and we can move forward with that analysis. But I guess I'm just trying to kind of look at this as how can I provide for my staff as well as the community.
Well, let me just continue. You weren't here, but this is this is your job now. So you just explained to us why it doesn't need to be there as much. But a year or two ago, there was somebody standing there telling us, different numbers telling us, this is why a building needs to be there. And we only go by what people tell us, so I'm just a little confused right now, that's all. And I'm more shocked, I guess, than anything.
Here's what I'll say is that I adamantly believe that that building needs to be there and that we need to continue to put forth the effort to staff that station. Without a doubt, because what truly makes a difference in emergency medicine is minutes. And if we're waiting on somebody who's in cardiac arrest for an ambulance to drive 25 minutes just to the scene versus 5 minutes to the scene, we're looking at the difference between them being completely non-viable by the time we arrive versus having a chance at them walking out of the hospital in 30 days. And, that the American Heart Association, there are multiple metrics that they analyze. One is, do you get pulses back on patients in cardiac arrest? And then the other is, what is their neurological outcome at 30 days? Did they survive to 30 days, and what is their neurological status? And it's not just cardiac arrest. It's hypoxic events from shortness of breath. It's traumatic injuries where, they've got significant blood loss, and when you don't have hemoglobin, you can't circulate oxygen. And, it's much, much more than just saying, well, they don't have as many calls out there. You're right, they don't. They don't have the same population as Frankfurt. But when we're talking about time, and how time can impact a patient's life and the quality of life, that truck has to be there. And it's worth the investment for the community. I believe that.
Renee?
I would just like to add one thing, a change, but one, I've always said we needed that medic truck out on the east side. Still do, absolutely. One big difference in these last 2 years was the change of taking ambulance 7 and putting it out at Station 13 and becoming ambulance 13 as a BLS truck. Forest Fire Department is rocking it out of the park, with responses, you know, absolutely. We still need that medic truck to respond, but before, these last 2 years, unfortunately, you know, because people are busy and some people don't have the time to volunteer, ambulance 7 was non-existent on runs.
I think the report.
Zero. So, and our only truck was coming from Frankfurt, that, you know, and then the fire departments would respond. We had no BLS ambulance responding for a very, very long time, and now that truck is going on every single call, you know, so they are getting there much quicker. And then we still supplement, obviously, with the medics. The medics still go, and we dispatch all BLS if we have a BLS in that area with the medics. But, you know, Station 13 taking over ambulance 13 and putting that in is huge, and that is a big area. They cover.
It's huge.
It's the biggest area. They cover Michigan Town, Forest, all of Warren Township. So that ambulance that was non-existent before as a BLS, that we didn't really have before, is now functioning and making those runs to help facilitate. But obviously, yes, I agree. We need that medic truck out there. It's still necessary too.
And I know, like, we talk about BLS trucks, ALS trucks, and the scope of practice between a paramedic versus an EMT, it's a dramatic difference in scope. And so, you know, it is worth the investment. And I think, you know, to go further, I want to say the number I reported was less than 5% is what Ambulance 7 was running for, like, the course of 3 years. I mean, it was non-existent. So moving Ambulance 7 out to Ambulance 13 has been super beneficial, but that medic unit, I mean, we carry way more drugs, we carry ventilators, we carry cardiac monitors, and those are all things that are outside of the scope of practice of EMT basics. And, you know, I'll just say, like, you know, if my family member was living in one of those community regions and they're having a heart attack, I want a paramedic responding that has the medications that can help facilitate me getting safely to the hospital. And yeah. And then to also say, like, it is by far the largest coverage area out of all of our other medic zones. It is by far the largest square mile region. The limitation is just the population.
And just to be clear, that 25 days with no coverage doesn't necessarily mean there'll be 25 days that end up with no coverage. They would just have to be filled with part-time, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think
they would be dependent upon a sign-up.
Yeah. And this is, to dive into the numbers even further, the medic unit that we put out at Boylston was the designated transfer truck, and their only responsibility was doing transfers. And evaluating the numbers further and the fiscal responsibility of utilizing that only for transfers was really quite inappropriate with, you know, the initial department that was doing interfacility transfers that was third contracted. They went out of business because it was financially irresponsible. Then we took it on as a county thinking that there was this opportunity for money, and we were operating at a net loss of negative $300,000 per year. And so we continue to provide these transfers and interfacility transfers with this ambulance, but now we also put them out in the field where they have the opportunity to have a primary response as 911. So we expanded their job duties to better facilitate a more responsible fiscal usage.
Jordan?
I would encourage Jeff or any of you to meet with Steve and see what EMS is doing in that have been implemented and how it compares to other communities. The service that the county has is second to none. I mean, you compare it to the county, it's crazy our call response, how quick it is. Now, I don't think you meant it this way, Jeff, but you said something along the lines, the county putting that out there. Either Bert and I were involved when that decision was made, so those questions you had really should be questions you asked, because the county is commissioners and council, and you signed off on doing that, so, just being honest.
I think I reflected what Clark brought to Stephen. Isn't that how this all started? Well, when I asked that, you said, didn't you say that Clark called you saying that concerns
It was
on that side?
It was brought up that, and I've had conversations with the township trustees out in that area that they drive by the station and they don't see a car, and they say, why is that? And it's, okay, well, we had a call off today, and so ultimately we had to condense our staffing to these, where the statistical odds of a call are occurring at. And
that's fine.
Yeah.
I was
So-
one of those people that was saying I'm shocked.
Understood.
And so in all the conversation there, I don't know if you were trying to make my point or make your point. I don't know what point was being made. But I said to Ally, if you can go without it for 25 days, then why don't you go back to the 80 days?
The goal is not to go for 25 days.
The goal is to
How
go
the
zero.
scheduling works, it creates 25 days.
Creates 25 holes in the
What
schedule.
it is he's looking at the lowest hanging fruit, and you have, based on the schedule and the personnel available, how can we staff where the resources are needed most? Unless you want to provide more resources so that it's staffed all the time. Comes down to the equation.
And the only way we do that is through the paramedic program, which I'm actually going to mention that too. But to kind of go off of what Jordan said, if you look at Tippecanoe County compared to us, they have 180,000 citizens and they're running 4 ambulances, and I have more paramedics employed here than Tippecanoe County has employed for them. It's a joke. And so the investment that this county has put forward to EMS and prioritized it in recent years, I can't express the gratitude. And truly, I'm from Tippecanoe County. There's a reason I'm here and not there, and it's because, you want to go where you're valued, and we're valued here. And so I just want to say, the value is seen, and it's important and recognized, and I just want to make sure we continue that trend. So
I appreciate the update. Everything you presented should work within the budget we approved, and so there's nothing that we need to do today. And
Stephen, we've got one question for clarification.
Yep.
And you're talking about the possible 25 days. Is that dependent on a paramedic being out there? What if you have a paramedic or EMT says, I'll work it, and you have no paramedic, or vice versa?
Good question. The idea is that we will have the schedule posted for a year out, and so the part-time staff members are going to be able to go through and say, hey, I can work this shift. And it's every other Thursday is the way it falls. And so we'll be able to push these part-time employees and say, hey, I need a shift a month, or at least at the minimum a shift every 2 months, and that gives them every other Thursday. And they can just fill that in, and they're gonna know 6 months in advance, hey, I'm working, the July 3rd Thursday or whatever it is. If we can't do that and we only have one person pick up, then the truck will be shut down. Unless, I guess, we can look at utilizing a chase paramedic out there. And so if we have a part-time paramedic pick up, they utilize the chase vehicle to respond out there, and they intercept with the BLS ambulance if it responds. We can look at that, and I think that's well within cost feasibility. It costs $30,000 for an SUV, so I don't think that's outlandish to consider. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
you had other topics?
Yeah, I got 2 more. Sorry.
Please continue.
Sorry, guys. I know. Paramedic program, just an update. We've made some great progress. We now have an articulation agreement with Columbia Southern University, and Purdue University will get that finalized and papered this week. Columbia Southern University will offer our students 30 credit hours upon graduation and completion of the National Registry, and Purdue University will offer several courses as credits that are kind of generic classes. It's not like a specific degree pathway. But the perk our students will get with Purdue is they will get a 20% discount on all undergrad studies and 14% on all graduate studies. So we have that. We have the clinical side agreement with IU Health, signed by everybody that it needs signed. We've submitted our application to the state of Indiana. This paramedic program, it's not a matter of if now, it's a matter of when.
Good.
So we'll be the first. We'll be the first in the state of Indiana to have a county-based paramedic program, and we're really, really excited to bring that forward between myself and Dolores. So,
A lot of hard work. Thank you.
yeah. And then on the topic of money, our ambulances are only getting more expensive. The price estimate I got for 2025 is $260,000, and it's 2 years out for an order right now at minimum. So looking at a more efficient way that we can help, save the county money, as well as, keep our reserves appropriate, is to do remounts. And what that does is it just takes the box where we keep all of our equipment and it puts it on a different chassis with a brand new front body and brand new Ford F-550. And it saves us $110,000. So it goes from 250 for 24 and 260 for 25. It drops it to 140,000. So I have contracts from them. What I would like to do, if you guys want to engage in this conversation, is to get a new truck for at the beginning of 2024. We've had our name on that for a couple years now at 240,000, and then a remount at the end of 24 for 150,000 or 145,000, and do away with the 2025 brand new truck, and then just incur that savings instead. And that would be through Osage.
Would that be another lease situation, or are you thinking outright purchase?
Well, personally, I think we can do it outright. I mean, right now we're budgeting 160,000 for, you know, the lease per year, and it's a 3-year lease, right, for 2 trucks at a time. Whereas I think if we go to the remount model where we save the box, we take care of the box, we just get a new truck. So really, ultimately, I think we can just continue that budget and purchase it as it is. I think we'll see the increase in 2024 with, you know, getting the 2 trucks within that year gap, but I think it sets us up going forward really, really well. And I can even call Osage and see if they'll push the remount to the beginning of 25, so it's that fiscal year instead of 24, kind of however you want to do it.
Okay. It's more of a cash flow thing than a budget year thing, you know, if we spend a lot of money in one year, whether the cash balance would allow it.
Right. So.
Well, let's talk about that in more detail, maybe offline.
Sounds great.
Rather than getting into it in the middle of the meeting, but, yeah, but I appreciate that. I like that idea. So, any questions for Stephen? No? Yes.
I want to let you know how much I appreciate what you've done.
Oh.
You've been great to work with our office, and I know there was some rough patches that we all had to get through, but everything is
That is directed at me.
going smooth, and we just,
Yeah,
I
it's-
appreciate your willingness to work with us.
Thank you. And thank you for the grace as I learned what I didn't know. So, thank you so much. Thank you guys. Sorry for the long-winded video.
Thanks, Stephen. Anybody else? Rodney?
Just wanted to step up, don't have near as anything as exciting as that, or the vigor of youth, it's amazing. But I did want to let you know I am exercising our option to move, I think, what is it, Britt, 20% of our approved budget from this last year to rainy day.
Rainy day.
So
I kind of thought 15 too, Rodney.
whichever it is what we're moving.
Okay.
Deanna has checked, and her and I were debating it, but it is 15 though, yeah.
Yeah, I
It
think
used to
it
be,
is-
we thought
It's
it was.
15
It used to.
or 20?
15.
It used to be, we thought it was 10.
It was
and
10, and then
it
they
moved to
statutorily
15.
changed it.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
But that's about 60,900 that will move into rainy day.
Good.
Which should still leave us a balance over $500,000 cash on hand right now, so.
That's great.
That's right.
It's a long way from the days of needing a loan in the February meeting to get this. So, anybody else? All right. Long meeting today. Thank you for your patience, but seeing and hearing no other business to come before the council, call the meeting adjourned.
Hey, Brett, watch your speed.